The European Union functions well within a global system based on the same ideas on which it was founded. A system that's based on rules, cooperation, consensus, and the idea of shared prosperity. That's to say, where the aim is for society as a whole to be better off. This is the system it's been trying to push since the end of World War II, with the creation of international organizations like the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, and so on. But today's world is becoming more complicated. Welcome back for our third and final episode on the EU in tomorrow's world, where we ask, is the EU losing its voice in the new world order? In this more complex world, people have lost a lot of their faith in this international rules-based system. We see the world's major powers changing their approach, and this is having a huge impact on the system. The US feels challenged by the rise in influence and power of China and the return of Russia to the world stage. There is more global competition between countries, and transactional diplomacy has become the new norm. It's basically a case of I'll do something for you if you do something for me in return. This is having a very negative effect on international organization. So yes, all of this is bad news for the European Union, confirms Luis Norberto González Alonso, a lecturer in international and European law at the University of Salamanca. Here he's speaking to Esteban, a journalist at Es Radio Castilla y León.
The world in which the European Union was born and developed over many decades is collapsing. And now we have to adapt to this new scenario, which presents us with extremely difficult challenges.
In a multiple system where countries have an equal voice, the EU's influence is stronger. By encouraging collective action and setting common standards, it is able to advance its interests. Power imbalances are more obvious in bilateral relations. With the EU facing a demographic decline and its economic and trade influence waning in comparison to other emerging and established powers, the bloc is now finding itself in a weaker position in many key negotiations. The EU isn't the only one in this boat. Other international organizations, like the United Nations, which are supposed to keep the peace and encourage countries to talk to each other, are also finding it hard to stay relevant and effective. The UN General Assembly is the perfect example of universal democracy in action. It's where all the world's leaders get together and everyone has the right to speak. But people often don't think it's that important because the decisions it makes aren't legally binding. And its role as a forum for backroom diplomacy has also become less important than in the past. These days, everything goes through the Security Council, which is the organization's top body. There, the 5 permanent members, China, France, Russia, the UK and the US, have given themselves veto power. That power has been used by the 3 non-European members to advance their own interests, which has led to problems and made the system ineffective. These issues are nothing new, but not much has been done to sort them out. Even after the Council added non-permanent members in 1965, its permanent membership and their ways of working and veto powers haven't changed since the Council founding after World War II. If Europe wants to stay true to its values, not to mention remain a relevant actor on the global stage, international institutions must continue to function, says Charles Goerens, a Luxembourgish member of the European Parliament from the Liberal Renew group, in a discussion with Jean-Claude, a journalist at 100.7. Goerens explains that the only way to ensure this is to change.
The UN no longer has any authority. It has basically exhausted itself. I hope this is not permanent. The UN no longer reflects the real balance of power in the world. When the UN was created, Africa had 400 million inhabitants. In another 70 years, it will have 4 billion. Basically, if you have 10 times more inhabitants and the composition of the UN Security Council remains the same, granting a continent like Africa no veto power, then you have understood nothing.
The World Trade Organization is of particular interest to the European Union, which is a major economic and trade power. For several years now, the WTO has been showing its limitation, especially when it comes to China and the market distortions caused by state support and other interferences that significantly tilts the market balance in favor of Chinese companies. People are less and less confident that these problems can be sorted out, especially in the US. This is one of the reasons why, even before Trump first became president in 2017, the US expressed its dissatisfaction by progressively preventing the organization's dispute settlement mechanism from continuing to function, as its arbitration of trade disputes went against US interests. But with its dispute settlement system now pretty much out of action, as it cannot hear appeals anymore, the 166 WTO member countries cannot rely on neutral arbitration to protect their interests and settle their trade disputes. This could lead to more trade tensions and the collapse of the international trading system based on rules. And what would this collapse mean for the EU? Mathieu, a journalist at Euradio, puts this question to Jenny Raflik, a professor of contemporary history at the University of Nantes in France.
The European Union would find itself in real difficulty, particularly economic difficulty, simply in terms of its weight in negotiations, in particular of the negotiations on customs duties. There is a real existential threat, in the literal sense of the word, to member states' economies and to the economy of the EU as a whole. If the European economy weakens, given the social and political tensions that have been rocking the Union for some time now, be it the rise of populism, social tensions, ethnic tensions or nationalism, then this poses a real internal danger to all European countries. If the economy collapses, all these tensions will obviously risk exploding and becoming very, very complex for states to manage.
To unblock this situation, the EU recently came up with an alternative to the WTO, which is a planned trade cooperation with 11 other major economies in the Asia-Pacific region. The EU has also come up with some ideas to update the WTO. Meanwhile, new players are seeking to make their mark by defending different ideas about how the world system should function and suggesting alternative ways of configuring it, says Gabriela Ciot, a professor at the Faculty of European Studies at the Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj. She is chatting with Dan at Radio Romania.
We have a multitude of regional actors trying to increase their influence and power because this is what is at stake in the reconfiguration of the international system. I am thinking, for example, of Turkey or state actors in the Gulf, such as Saudi Arabia. This is shown by the mediation attempts of these state actors. I am referring here to the international mediation of peace negotiations for Ukraine, because it is this event that will lead to a repositioning of the international actors.
It is true that medium-sized countries are becoming more influential in international politics. This is shown by their attempts to play a mediating role outside their natural areas of influence. Turkey, for example, has helped to swap prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine. But how to make sure the EU can remain a voice that can be heard? In an interview with journalist Sina at IMS, Andreas Marchetti, a senior lecturer at the German University of Paderborn, insists that Europe does still have a role to play.
Das wird sehr stark nachgefragt, dass Europa als vermittelnder Akteur häufig auftritt.
There is a very strong demand for Europe to act as a moderator, a mediator, to work out some middle ground between conflicting positions. And secondly, in the other sense of moderating, as a power that brings balance.
As Europe finds itself at a turning point in trying to figure out its place in the world, these experts and observers believe that it should try to lead the way in promoting democracy, the rule of law and human rights, as well as defending a multilateral system based on shared rules and principles. To fight against climate change is another area where third countries could expect the European Union to play a leading role on the international stage, adds Professor Raflik. And it's only fair that the bloc takes the lead on climate action, given that it's a major historical contributor to climate change.
On an issue such as climate change, there is a European identity, because Europe is the only entity that is truly bringing these debates to the international stage and wanting to move forward. So perhaps there are also avenues here that would enable the European Union to speak with one voice and show that it is united on certain issues.
And it's only fair that the bloc takes the lead on climate action, given that it's a major historical contributor to climate change. Indeed, back in October, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen travelled to New York to deliver this message. The world can count on the EU's continued climate leadership, she told the 2025 UN Climate Summit. Compared to the post-war period, Europe is bigger, but less stable. The fact that unanimity is required for all high-stakes decisions on matters like security and foreign policy is making it hard for the bloc to speak with one strong voice. It's obvious that the EU won't be able to chart its own course if its 27 member states cannot agree on how to settle their differences. That's what Triantafylos Karatrantos, a researcher at the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, told Nikos and Mariana when they interviewed him on Greece's Sky Radio.
Let's take Viktor Orban and Hungary, for example. How can pockets of resistance that do not share the same view as the other European countries and the European Commission itself, which sets the tone, be brought into this framework? Because if we constantly have a veto player, a country that constantly blocks these decisions, they will never go anywhere.
Andreas Marchetti thinks, though, that the EU is slowly progressing in the right direction, with the 27 member states increasingly seeing eye to eye because they face the same pressure from common threats. And this is partly evident in the support for Ukraine. So now is not the time for Europe to wait and see, but to get it together and take action, says Luxembourgish politician Charles Goerens. He adds that the EU has already lost time and influence and cannot afford to waver any longer.
We are closer to agony than to a success story. We need to be aware of this. And if we want to exist on the international stage, we must also recognize politically that we are living in a world where power relations are increasingly taking precedence, where principles are subordinate to force exercised by Putin, Trump, and Xi Jinping alike. We can only come out on top if first, we remain true to our values, and second, we try to exert greater economic and military influence than we do today.
We have to be firm, concurs Spanish academic González Alonso.
Well, it's about protecting our model, our way of understanding the world, society, economic relations. And for that, we have to be firm. We have to be firm with regard to the outside world, but we also have to be firm internally. Because within the European Union itself, there are also somewhat divisive tendencies that are manifesting themselves very clearly.
We are currently seeing the creation of a new world order, where certain Western powers won't have as much influence, and countries from the global south will be more involved. And this, in many ways, is a positive change, because it's more realistic and fairer. But this should ideally happen in a system where leaders work together and share the same ideas about the well-being of citizens today and tomorrow. And I believe the EU still has a voice to be heard here. That's me for today. Our next 3 episodes will look into culture. And our first question will be about history. Could Europe forget its past and end up doing the same mistakes? I'll catch you next week, and in the meantime, check out our website www.euronetplus.eu for more news from the Euranet Plus network.